Hey everybody, Steven here, and today I'm looking at performance with Diablo 4 running on the ROG Ally. With this, want to get some of the setting information out of the way here first. I've tried this with auto on the RAM configuration for the GPU, and I noticed that it just wasn't hitting the numbers that I was wanting. In fact, it was running just regular RAM at 14 to 15 gigs and then only really reserving for the video RAM like 400 megabytes, where when you leave this on 8 you get more with the video RAM here, and we're looking more at 4 gigs of RAM, and so the performance is just better. With the settings, I have this at 1080p and the 720p medium settings because I've noticed that I just get the best performance overall with medium versus low or high. And we're looking at a couple drop in FPS if you go to high, and then you gain a couple if you go to low. So just again, medium seems like the best sweet spot. I do have the fidelity super resolution turned on to balanced. And for the medium settings, this is just the preset. So I'm not adjusting anything in this again. So this is something that is very easy to configure for everybody. With turning on the 8 gigs of video RAM, I have noticed that in terms of going from 4 to 8, you do see an increase in performance here, and you don't really see a loss in anything else, but you will have to restart the ROG in order to get access to the 8 gigs. Now looking at this, we're going to go 1080p first. We're going to start at the 15 watts, then we're going to go to the 25, and then I'm going to plug this in and we're going to do the full 30. Alright, so we have 1080p, 15 watts. The FPS range is 45 to 68. The average here is going to be 56.5. The mid 50s held consistently with this. I've noticed with the whole game, it just jumps a lot. We have some periods where it is very consistent with the FPS, but again, if you notice here, it does jump around quite a bit. But this plays really good, and you're going to get more battery life at the 15 watts compared to the 25. Now I haven't done a strict measurement of this, but I can get about close to 2 hours at the 15 watts, where at 25 watts I'm going to in an hour drop the battery down to about 30 to 35% with this. But jumping to 25 watts here at 1080p, the FPS range is 58 to 76 for an average of 67. 60 to 65 held pretty consistently with this setup. You'll notice with the rest of the video, these are bigger ranges. The game again jumps around quite a bit, but again, this one held pretty consistent to the 60 to 65 range, which is really nice to see here. So 1080p at the 25 watts, and I think this plays very solid here. Now jumping ahead to the 30 watts, we've simply plugged this in, and then you get the 5 extra watts. So it goes from the 58 to 76 to 57 to 76, so it drops down half an FPS here. So it's basically the same, right? And we're still getting the mid 60s for the range that holds consistently. I'm not quite sure why we didn't get a bigger boost in performance outside of I can't replicate the exact same gameplay for every single portion that I'm testing here. It's all a little bit different, right? And there may be more chaos on screen with this compared to the other one. I'm also trying to limit any of the in-between, because I'm going to get huger spikes when there's nothing really going on. So if I'm walking from one area to another and the environment isn't very demanding graphically and I don't have any enemies, I'm going to get a huge jump. And I'm actually going to cover that here in a minute and showcase what that can do to the FPS, because you're always going to get that jump. You're going to get a bump. It's going to jump anywhere from what I've seen from maybe 3 to 5, but it could go like 5 to 15 depending on the setup that you have. One of the other areas that it'll jump though is if you zoom in. So like immediately I jump into the 70s and 80s now. So if you do want to do that zoom, that is an option, and it bumps up the FPS. Again, that can change and range from like 5 to 10 or 10 to 15, just depends, but you aren't going to see as much around you. So it's just a very narrow focus in terms of what you're visually seeing gameplay wise. Jumping now to 720p 15 watts, the range is 72 to 96 for an average of 84. I was seeing that the upper 70s to low 80s was holding pretty consistently here. So we are seeing a bump. And again, at 15 watts, you do get better battery life. The resolution change here, personally, I prefer 1080p, but if that isn't something that bothers you, then 720p, you're going to get more FPS, right? We're seeing a pretty significant leap here. So comparing this to the 1080p at 30 watts, we are jumping up 17.5 for the average FPS here, which is really good. Again, lower wattage means longer battery life, and you are getting that increase in performance here in terms of the FPS. But the drop in resolution, that's just something that maybe you don't want to deal with the lower resolution look of everything that you would get with that. Jumping ahead now, this is 720p 25 watts. I put this in here specifically, and I mentioned this earlier, because I'm highlighting the fact that if you're not in combat, with all of these different variations on these settings here, you do have these larger ranges. I'm really focusing on, hey, when you're in combat, what are you seeing? Because with this right now, it's 79 to 114 FPS for the range. Now that 114 hits for just a split second, but that brings the average here to 96.5 frames. And in combat, we're seeing upper 80s to mid 90s. That's holding pretty consistently. So it is really solid with the performance for the 25 watts at 720p. But again, you're gonna see that the battery just drains really quick with this. So my guess is an hour and a half tops before you need to plug this thing in. Zooming in here, we're gonna see an even bigger increase with this. So it's still 720p, it's still the 25 watts, but now we're like upper 90s to like low 100s with this that you're just seeing consistently. Again, not in combat, just as you're running around. But this right here is actually in combat now. So the FPS range is 83 to 97. The average here is 90. That's still awesome. Again, the 120 hertz screen here, this is where this is paying off with this game. It's not hitting 120 hertz consistently here at all, but the fact that you're getting above 60 is awesome. So mid 80s to low 90s is what I'm seeing is holding consistent with this. Jumping now to the turbo mode with the 30 watts when this is plugged in. Looking at just in combat here for the most part, it's 84 to 102 for the range for an average of 93 FPS. Mid 80s to mid 90s is holding consistently here also. So overall, I'd say the bump is maybe like 3 to 5 frames in general, kind of what you're seeing, but that's fluctuating. So personally, it's not something that I would necessarily push to do with this, because looking at the temperature increase with the GPU here, to me, it's not something where, hey, an extra 3 to 5 FPS is gonna be all that worth it when I'm pushing higher temps the whole time on this. Now, outside of combat, you do get really close to the 120 here, and you are like low 100s, and then it'll fluctuate. You may even see it hit 120, but it's not something it's just holding that consistently here. Again, the average is 93 that you're seeing, with the mid 80s to mid 90s being what you're seeing more consistently in combat. Now to finish this out, I'm running 1080p 25 watts. It's just something that I personally prefer because I'm really only playing for about an hour at a time when I'm on this handheld. If I'm going to play any longer, typically I'm actually playing on my PC, or I would drop it down to the 15 watts if I needed this to last longer. You have all these options when it comes to that, which is great. Now the footage here is going to get blurry, unfortunately, just because my camera decided to zoom in on the actual desk, and I just don't have time to go back and film this portion of it, but it's just battling the final boss of this dungeon here. And so this is going to be more intense in terms of the demand on the hardware, and 1080p medium settings running 25 watts, we're consistently holding like 60s with this, right? We're going to see drops into the 50s. Of course, you're going to see that, but like 50s to 60s is great on this. And the bigger thing here is we're playing a game that I just can't get on the Steam Deck without actually just hacking that for lack of a better word with it, where you're going to have to go into the OS and then download this and then try and run it that way, and that may have issues with it. I don't know, but this is just simple and easy to do with the ROG Ally here, and I think performance is great. Again, you don't necessarily hit 120 hertz the whole time, but I'm still quite impressed with what this is able to do. So that's going to be it for this video, everybody. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section when it comes to the performance with Diablo 4 running on the ROG Ally here. If there's other games that you want to see me test out, by the way, let me know in the comment section as well. I try to cover more information in regards to the performance than I've seen with other channels, and if I'm missing something here too, let me know and I will try to add that in. That's it for this one, everybody. If you like the video, hit the like button for me. If you want to continue to follow along with all my content, hit the subscribe button, and as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.